weeks ago, we did a session on joy. And with the kind of year that 2020 has been, I felt like it was very necessary to start inserting some of this into what we're doing in the integrated care echo space, partially because I do associate echo with joy, but also because it's just been a really rough year. So in putting that together, I also realized there's so much here. I can't have joy and work also and joy and still have a 15 minutes. So this is kind of a follow-up to that previous didactic blitz, where we're going to be specifically talking about joy within the workplace and how we can create joy in our work. So before we really get into it, I'm curious from all of you, how do you define joy? And you can either use the chat box or you can unmute and just let me know how you feel about it. But how do you define joy? What does it mean to you to have a sense of joy in work? Any volunteers?
I guess I would say in terms of work, not feeling so run down, not feeling unappreciated. So the opposite of that. So feeling appreciated, feeling like you have the energy, feeling like you have the time, kind of cheery. You're enjoying your day, things like that. Feeling like you can come to work with a purpose.
Thank you.
I would just add that it's very deep. That word is deep rather than superficial. It's way past happy. It's, yeah, I guess that would just be to add because her definition was fabulous too.
Thanks. Any other thoughts? Okay, so it's important for us to think about this because I agree with all of you, and I agree that it is beyond happy. It's more, it's not just about a single moment, and I think happiness is something that kind of comes and goes, and we use a lot of these terms interchangeably, but it's important to think about how we define joy. So if you look at just like a dictionary definition of joy, of course, it's, we find from Merriam-Webster the emotion evoked by well-being, success, good fortune, it to experience great pleasure, delight, to rejoice. And Mannion, who I used a lot of his article within this didactic blitz, he defined joy as an intensely positive, vivid, and expansive emotion that arises from an internal state or can result from an external event or situation. He also refers to it as kind of a transcendent state of heightened energy and excitement. So it is that kind of that bigger than happy, more expansive than happy, and something that can, kind of come from something that happens to us or something that's going on within us. But it's that bigger piece of it that happiness quite doesn't quite do the word justice. So there's a handful of people that define joy in work in the literature. The Echo Institute actually guides us. This is one of the biggest values of Project Echo, is finding joy in work. So what they define it as is a nurturing environment that allows us, each of us, to do what we do best and balance our energy. So that's one of the values that they espouse to, and one of the values that we definitely hold within our work. A little bit, other places in the literature, they talk about joy in practice as being aspirational, where professionals are emotionally and behaviorally compassionately engaged in the care of patients and the mission of their organization. So we can find a lot of joy in work when we have the ability to engage in a practice that we feel like is mission oriented, and is somewhere within our, in alignment with our own personal values. So Mannion did a study where he interviewed a number of people to try to get them to identify what it was that helped them identify joy in work. And it's a pretty interesting and not very long article, but he tried to capture lots of people from, it was all healthcare, but people both in management and frontline service, along with physicians, counselors, social workers. It's a pretty good representative group. And the fact is that we're pretty common across all of these people. So there's pieces of this that the work itself can provide some joy in work. So whether that's the outcomes of your work, so a sense of accomplishment or achievement, or you can see progress. Maybe it's even the characteristics of the work. Does the work make a difference? Does it allow you to help someone else? Do you have some autonomy in your work? Were you presented new opportunities, opportunities for growth and expansion, and to receive, to just do new things? Another major factor is the people and the relationships. So the connection to others, recognition and appreciation, both expressed and received. The self. So we are a part of this, and what we bring to the table definitely matters. So having a sense of self-competence, positive self-esteem, having attitudes and values and beliefs that, some of our attitudes, values, and beliefs will definitely either enhance or, could retract from our ability to feel joy in our work. And then the work environment, so that organizational culture and the social piece of our work. He put together a couple models, and this one was a model of how joy can be expressed in the workplace. So you have this, the work itself and the people and relationships and the work environment, then some type of a stimulus, and how those three factors and the self all kind of merge together allows the person to make a judgment about, is this a good or bad? Do I feel positive about this? Do I feel negative about this? And then from that can be the sense of a feeling of joy, and whether or not you express the joy internally and not express it externally, or you externally express it, you actually can then have a bigger impact, and it kind of trickles to other people. Joy will rub off on other people. So what he talks a lot about is, and as does the other literature, that people find that when they're around joyful people, they too tend to feel more joyful. And I think, so we have to talk about the absence of joy too, because there's many things that contribute to the absence of joy. And then we know that there are many, bad side effects about having an absence of joy. And we talked about that a couple weeks ago too. But in the absence of joy, you tend to be in a place of perfectionism, with a lot of self-criticism. Much of our culture does really impact this. People who are not willing to accept and admit some vulnerability, delay gratification, people who are working in isolation or suffering in silence without trying to express themselves. We see that depression and burnout and even suicide are all related to an absence of joy. Substance use, people, turning over jobs. So we need joy because there's a lot of downsides to it. So some of the barriers to joy in our work. When you look at the literature, there are certain things, and the culture and some of the hidden curriculum are really things that do contribute to an absence, or create some of the barriers in finding joy in our work. So as one of the big factors here is a loss of time between patient and physician. The less time you have for that face-to-face interaction, even if it's on Zoom, the less joy people tend to experience. Another contributing factor to this is the tension between the business and the service sides of medicine. So are you're expected to churn through people rapidly and not really give them the time and effort that they need? Are you asked to not do certain tasks because they're not billable? Implicit and explicit messages that we receive from the culture, from other people within the practice, from other people within healthcare, as a large system, even at the university, from professors, from leadership. There are implicit and explicit messages that we get that set us up to have some unrealistic expectations. And so that kind of gets back to that working in isolation, suffering in silence, the expectation that you can't be vulnerable. All of this comes from the implicit and explicit messaging. And then an inadequate support to really mitigate the effects of chronic exposure to suffering. So that is another piece of this. I mean, compassion fatigue is a very real thing and sometimes looks like burnout, but when we're seeing suffering constantly, and as a healthcare providers, we sit in and witness people suffering all of the time, but we need to have support to mitigate the effects of that. Other things that can be barriers to joy in work are staffing issues. So if you have coworkers that are negative, that are unsupportive or uncooperative, or if you have coworkers that feel like they can't be supportive to you because they won't be supported by by their management or their leadership, and inadequate resources or an inappropriate use of resources, and that's really a subjective thing. If I feel like the university is inappropriately using resources and they're putting money over here instead of over here, that obviously can become a barrier to my feeling of joy in work. If you're doing things that are unappealing, redundant, or kind of repetitive tasks, one thing that's an individual barrier to joy can be a failure to set personal boundaries. And that can be, at an organizational level and a personal level, but we have to have good boundaries and be supported in the ability to set boundaries. One of the things that I continue to practice at and have for the last couple of years is learning when to say no to things. There's lots of good and exciting work going on, but I can't do all of it, and I certainly can't do all of it very well. So learning how to say no, which I feel like a lot of us are not great at. And inflexibility. Flexibility is really so necessary for so much of the work that we do. Things that promote joy in work on an organizational level are designing systems that actually address the needs. So when we're looking at doing any kind of system redesign or process redesign, and at the university right now we're doing a lot of Lean Six Sigma, but let's not just look at what the ultimate needs are. What also is going to make this easier for the people who are involved in the system? How do we make the process better for the individuals who are using it? Creating an environment where others are allowed to ask for what they need. So if people need support, if you need different resources, being able to ask for that. If you need time, being able to ask for that. Developing management that is not only competent and has good management skills, but that fosters collaborative leadership rather than an authoritarian kind of a structure. Building community in whatever way that you can. And it can be very hard, but it's super important for us to start to promote joy. Removing sources of frustration and inefficiency, that kind of goes back up to the organizational systems. How do we make things, if we know that there's a sticking point, can we get rid of that? Or can we alter it to minimize that sticking point so it's less frustrating or more efficient? And reducing preventable patient harm, because we are all in healthcare, and obviously we get into this for the people that we're working with, and we get into this for the patients and clients that we serve in the community. So when we see that our system is doing something that could increase patient harm, that's an easy way of actually promoting more joy, is actually preventing some of that harm to the people that we care about. Other ways to promote and amplify the joy in your work on more of a personal level is, relationships. Relationships mean so much. When they looked at all of the factors that promote joy, relationships and meaningful connections with one another are really one of the biggest things that are connected to a sense of joy. Other things can be love of the work that you do. So being not only in a field, but being within a position, at an organization where you feel like the work is meaningful, where you can fulfill some personal mission or have a sense of personal pride and purpose and pride in the work that you do. The impact, what's the wow factor in your work? Are you able to do something very monumental? Is there, what is it that really gives your work a sense of impact? In a practice environment, the things that really can promote joy are teamwork, particularly if the team is highly functional and works well together. I mean, that's definitely, a big component to it is having a good team. Leaders that model positive teamwork and that model what kind of practice environment you want to have. And again, that goes back to that collaborative leadership. Opportunities to grow and learn. So people do feel more joy when they're given new opportunities to advance and to learn new skills and to grow in their, both personally and professionally. Autonomy and authority, and that can't be over all aspects of work, but where you can have aspects of work that you can have some autonomy and personal authority over some of the things that you do. Just giving people a little bit more autonomy does tend to increase their sense of joy. Recognition and gratitude. And I think that's, again, that's about giving and receiving. So our workplaces can make a point of giving recognition and gratitude to us, and we should be making a point of giving recognition and gratitude to those around us. And like we talked about in the previous didactic, giving to others often enhances our own sense of joy. So one of the ways that I can very simply try to put more joy into my life is telling the people that I work with how much I appreciate them. And achievement. So many people do feel a sense of joy after they're able to achieve something that they've been working towards. Other things that promote joy in work would be knowing, for yourself, some self-knowledge, knowing what you need to thrive, what kind of workplace is going to allow you to feel a sense of joy. And that's going to be very individual. Exercising the ability to ask for what you need. So if your organization creates the opportunity and allows for you to ask, we have to make a point of doing that. And that's another thing that people, speaking for myself, I'm not great at it. If I need more time, many times in the past, I would have just tried to, I would have put in more hours or, stayed up late and, made sure that whatever the task was that I needed to do, that I finished it, even at the expense of my own personal wellness. Where what I really should be doing is saying, hey, I need more time, and asking for that. Investing time to get to know and enjoy your colleagues. So part of these, building community really is taking the time to get to know folks. Within good teamwork, one of the things that's very interesting is that if you're going to have a good team cohesion, you have to have some social interaction, not just task-based interaction for that team cohesion to really thrive. Focus on our individual wellness. We have to be well in order to promote joy and to be able to feel joy. So express gratitude, as I said before. The 20% rule, I want to credit to Dr. Smith, because maybe this does come from something, but as he's been our interim chair, he's talked a lot about this. But try to make it so that 20% of your work can be something that you really enjoy and that you're very passionate about. So if I get just a little bit of time to focus on my passions rather than the tasks that have to be done, that tends to increase people's ability to feel joy within their work. And I guess, how do we define achievement too? So one of the things that I learned working in community mental health is that I had to redefine success. So success for one of my clients might be that they did their own grocery shopping this week without assistance. And that is success. And so redefining what it means for a patient to show progress, because sometimes in that work, it can be really hard to watch people not thrive. But if we start to look at the little incremental successes, I think we can see the bigger picture and help them to see the bigger picture in how each little success adds up. So this it's again from the Mannion article, but it looks at the bigger it was a nice way of summarizing. So we have our sense of self, and then we have all of these factors that either inhibit or drive our ability to experience joy. So, driving forces like appealing work, making a difference, recognition, appreciation. Also, on the flip side of that, negative coworkers, a lack of progress, fatigue, or self-doubt, all of this contributes into our ability to either feel or express joy within our work. And some of these are within our control and some of these are not, and there's nothing to say that one of these will be the one thing for you, but they're all possible factors, and organizations and managers, supervisors can look at this as a means of trying to figure out, okay, how do we negate some of these inhibiting forces and try to promote some of the driving forces. So in closing thoughts, do you think that there's anything that you do that leads to contributing to a sense of joy in your work environment? Is there anything that your organization does, and how much more fulfilled, and this is a question to all of you, how much more fulfilled could we be if we found joy in the work that we do?
And maybe this is only my experience, but I think that all of us experience both ends of it. Maybe some more than others, as far as what the driving forces will be, or what the inhibiting forces or factors. And like you said, there are some things that, are out of our control. But I think that if we can promote or try to encourage, depending on what our roles are, those driving forces as much as we can in our abilities, it's interesting to see the rise of motivation, what more you're able to accomplish, the excitement of coming in, really talking highly about your position and what you do, and how that affects others. Because whether we try to or not, depending on what we do or what we experience, does rub off on how we interact with other individuals.
Yeah, thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. So some of the articles that I had referenced in this did talk about that rubbing off on others, and it's kind of contagious. And other literature that I've looked at actually talks about how rudeness is contagious. So both joy and rudeness can be contagious in the workplace, and one of them tends to, increase patient safety and reduce incidents, and the other tends to decrease patient safety and increase the likelihood of problems. So it's really important that we try to take into our workplace what we'd like to get out of it.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because unfortunately, at least in my experience of what I've seen, and also gone through, those negative factors can sometimes overweigh the positivity. So, for example, I've been in an environment where I am just naturally optimistic. I'm naturally positive. But when you're in an environment where there's constant negative conversation, talk, it really, no matter how much you come in to try to be that positive light, it's interesting how it really that negativity draws you, and then you start to really feel that. And so I think recognizing that is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think another thing, some of it you can adjust based on what you went into your particular profession for. So, I, having moved more into macro type work, public health type level, sometimes you can lose sight of the fact that you're talking about real people. You're talking about all these systems. So, one of the things I found valuable in meetings like that, more with ADM than we have to do with Neomed, but is to have somebody talk about an actual person who they helped, in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And then that way, that person feels good because they're describing a good outcome. And others are happy to think, hey, we really are here about people. And I think it changes the tone of some of the stuff, the politics and things that we can't avoid. But I think to be able to always take the high road, what's best for the patient, and wearing my NAMI Ohio hat, sometimes what's best for the family, which therefore often is best for the patient. I think that helps me a lot to sort of see through the, pardon the phrase, the crap, and we've had a lot of that in this year, with the COVID and everything else. I think some of it's about that. And then the other one, which I try to use sometimes off the mark, sometimes on the mark, is humor. ADM board, we have our clinical meeting, which of course became weekly, just like we've done weekly staff meetings in Neomed to keep people connected. We literally, on the agenda, we end with a joke. Somebody has to come prepared. Sometimes several do. Once or twice, nobody did, and we all had to go on the internet and find one. But at least we're ending on a positive note. It doesn't, that extra minute or two does not detract from getting things done, and probably greatly enhances the, gee, I'm glad I'm going to this meeting today, because no matter what we talk about, we're going to end with a joke. That's kind of nice, right? Something to look forward to. So.
I love it. For those of you that are regulars on here, you know that I'm a big fan of humor. Humor of all sorts. I'm going to stop my share.
I was going to say, just adding in like a check-in with your team that you work with. So I'm a family doc. So in residency, I used to get there early and we would huddle about our patients, but me and my nurse would also huddle about, why we might be in a rush that day. Did we have a family obligation that night? Did, Was there something we were trying to get to? How was her weekend? Even if you're not super personal with the team, I think, or familiar, I think even adding some personal component. So even at SOAR, I don't know the students very well, but I typically try to ask what year they are, what they plan to go into, just to do a little bit of team building. And I think because when the team's working together, I think that brings more joy. So it's about the patient, but it, like we've talked about, it also is how you feel caring for them can, I think, affect it too. So.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So much of this is our team and how we're functioning and how we bolster that team. Amy, you were unmuted for a second.
Yeah, it was actually, as I was listening to your presentation, I was thinking about Dan Pink is a business writer, business researcher, and he did a TED Talk a couple years ago. Sorry for the truck, I live on a main road. He did a TED Talk a couple years ago, and there's actually like a whiteboard drawing that kind of goes with it if you look it up on YouTube. But one of the things he talked about was motivation and how we always think if you pay people more money, it'll make people work better. It'll make them work faster, it'll make them do more. And he talked about how in simple repetitive tasks that works, but anything that involves creativity or kind of that conceptual thinking, which is exactly what we do in our jobs, that's not what motivates us. But he was talking about how we have to be paid enough to take money off the table. Like I have to be able to pay my rent and pay for food and pay for clothes, that kind of thing. But that money isn't going to be the thing that motivates me. And I really thought about the correlation between what you were saying with joy and motivation, because he said it breaks down to autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And so if we're able to see those three things in our work, and I think with our clients, if we're able to help them set goals that show those things, we'll help to be more joyful on our side, but also help them create more joy in their lives too. But yeah, I really appreciated your presentation too.
Thank you.